me. It's in Spanish, and let's just read this book and let's talk about it at our coaching sessions, right? And the coach might say, okay, great. But maybe 3 chapters in, like, you're finding that you don't have time to read the book, or it's actually more boring than you thought it would be, or maybe it's too challenging because there's so much vocabulary that you really don't know, and it's taking you forever just to get through a chapter. So I talked a little bit about that in our episode on learning with audiobooks and books in general. So, but in any case, if you find out that approach isn't working, your coach will say, listen, I noticed that our last 3 sessions, you're still on chapter 1. Okay. Do we need to come up with a different approach, or do you like going through the book at this pace because you're learning so much vocabulary? So they'll check in with you and decide if we need to switch our strategy. Maybe we take a break from the book and we use a song instead, or maybe we watch a really interesting video that's about the same topic. Whatever it is, the goal is to keep you motivated, keep you engaged, and a coach is constantly helping you check on that throughout the process so that your learning does not get stale, instead of just saying, okay, we have to finish this book because the book is what's on the schedule. A language teacher or profesor usually follows a pretty rigid structure. So this goes along with the formality of teaching, and also that teaching usually does follow some type of curriculum or course or book. And this is because, again, teachers usually work at a language school, or they work at a college or university where they're actually prescribed a curriculum for you, and they have to follow that structure. Yes, teachers that are really good can be a little bit creative, but in general, they have to follow the structure that's given to them by the institution that they work for. And even if you find an independent language teacher, what you'll probably notice is that if they've worked with a lot of students, they tend to follow pretty much the same approach. They might already have some materials prepared that they've used with other students that aren't actually tailored to you. So even if you find an online teacher that doesn't work for a bigger institution, they tend to have their own way of doing things. And I think about this now. If you're a dancer, this analogy would make sense to you. I think about this type of approach of language teaching like a dancer who always does the same 3 to 5 moves that they just learned in a class. We usually call turn patterns, right? So famously, there's teachers that teach certain, styles of dancing, certain turn patterns, especially with salsa. And I always know when I'm dancing with someone who learned from a particular teacher because they do the same sequence of the same 5 moves over and over again, regardless of the song or who they're dancing with. Which, as you can imagine, if you're a very musical person, that this does not always work because maybe those 5 moves don't go with that song, right? So, or that dancer isn't skilled enough or is more advanced, and that approach of doing those same 5 moves is either too difficult or too boring for that particular dancer. So I think about that as like having a bad salsa lead. That's just my way of thinking about it. If you have a language teacher that uses the same approach with all of their students, is that it really can feel awkward if you don't fit into that one specific group that they've already developed materials for. A language coach, on the other hand, is flexible and adaptive. So it's like a really good lead. And ladies, if you dance salsa and you've ever had a good lead, you know what I'm talking about. This is someone who feels you out, who knows how to adapt to you, who adapts to the music and the rhythm and the musicality and the level of skill of the person they're dancing with to create an enjoyable experience on the dance floor for you. So if you know what I'm talking about and you're a dancer, then amazing. If not, forget that analogy and just realize that a good coach will do something similar. They're going to adapt to your needs and they're going to be flexible. They're not going to say, we must learn this book because this is the book that I like. They're going to say, okay, maybe you don't like books. Let's find another way. Maybe we can use audio material if that's something like. Maybe instead of using audio books, we can use some shorter news clips that I can find for you. Maybe we can read articles together so you can practice your pronunciation. They are going to work with whatever interests and motivates you and make sure that their approach to sharing the language with you and facilitating your learning actually works for you as a language learner. And lastly, to draw my last sort of comparison between language teachers and coaches, is that a language teacher is usually focused on testing. So the way to see if you've learned or you're competent in the concepts they're teaching you, they will often test you or quiz you, but generally there's some sort of cumulative test to see where you are with what they've taught. A language coach, on the other hand, focuses more on feedback and reflection. So this is two ways that you'll know if you're actually making progress. One is your own reflection. They will encourage you to reflect on your own progress to see, okay, well, when we started maybe 30 or 60 days ago, I noticed that you could not talk in the past tense at all, and here we are 60 days later, and you are still making a few mistakes, but you know what? You're doing amazing. You're able to talk about your day. You were able to tell me what you did on vacation. You were able to talk about what you did this past week while you were at work, and you could not do that when we first started. So that's the type of feedback that a coach will give you, and also ask you to reflect on your own progress so that you can make these observations for yourself. This is so powerful because this is the process that actually allows you to stay motivated to move forward. And motivation is probably 80% of the game when it comes to language learning. It's a lot less about technique and a lot more about sticking with it long enough to see real results. So this is one of the critical parts of coaching that you really just don't get with teaching. And even a good language teacher sometimes may struggle with that because they're focused so much on getting you through a particular program or curriculum. So now that you know the difference between a language teacher and a language coach, when would you need a language coach? This is something really interesting to think about, because I think for a lot of us, coaching, like I said, may be a new concept, or we may not know exactly how it applies to languages. But there are some cases in particular where I would definitely recommend that you have a language coach versus a teacher. Now, the one caveat I will say, if you're an absolute beginner and you really aren't sure what to do, following a program or getting a teacher is not a bad idea. However, you might find that it's a good idea to start with a coach, and here are some reasons why. Number one, if you have a specific goal that you want to achieve, it's probably a great idea to get coaching. And honestly, you probably will use a blend of teaching and coaching approaches as you move towards fluency. It really just depends on where you are in your journey. So whether you have a short-term goal, like you want to visit Puerto Rico this December and you want someone to sort of help you be able to survive that trip, or if you have a longer-term goal, like you want to move to Medellin, Colombia and retire there in maybe 20 years from now, or 10 years from now, regardless of the time frame, if you have a specific goal, it's really important to have a coach, because the coach will actually help you come up with a customized plan to reach that particular goal. And the other thing about goals is they usually have a deadline. So, if your trip is in December, you're getting on the plane on December 15th, right? That's not negotiable. So that date is on the calendar. If you're planning to move to Medellin to retire, well, maybe you have a retirement date. If you're lucky, if you're like many of us, you have no idea if you'll ever retire. But let's say the date's on the calendar and you know that exactly, 8 years from now, you'll have enough credits or whatever you need in your job to get a pension, if those still exist,